You're listening to the YWAM Nashville podcast. My name's Cody.
My name is Michael, and we'll be your hosts for this season.
Good morning and welcome. This is now episode 13
Oh,
of
yeah.
the YWAM Nashville podcast.
Come on.
I'm here with Michael again this morning.
Hey.
How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm kind of tired. We ran out of coffee, and I didn't realize I was relying on caffeine until I've been tired all day the last 2 days.
Question is, Cody, is that an idol that you're relying on outside of Jesus?
I don't think so. I don't want coffee right now. I just want to be awake.
Oh, fair enough.
But
fair
so
enough.
I'm having some tea instead.
Jesus is the best caffeine. Wow.
That's true. Yeah. Probably be a better solution to just not be dependent on caffeine, but anyways. Speaking of American culture.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into that, though, we got to do all the rituals, the usual outline of the episode. So that means our brand new prayer points segment.
Da-da-da.
New to you.
Ba-da-ba-da-da-da.
It's not actually new.
Da-da.
It's just kind of, we changed the name, so, you know, it's sort of new.
I don't know the rest of the song.
Oh, I don't know what song you were doing.
Yeah, I'm not actually
So,
sure.
yeah. It's, again, only been 2 days since we recorded the last few.
Yep.
We're really pumping them out here because we got to get them edited and did and done. It's going to be a busy month, and we got lots of stuff to do besides podcasting, but
Tis true.
you can rely on them being published at their normal times. We just won't have up-to-date prayer points per se, but so anyways, is there anything new under the sun as of 2 days ago?
Well, Ecclesiastes says that there's nothing new under the sun.
Oh. Well, there you have it, folks.
Yeah, I don't know.
Tell that to news. More like olds.
It's not dad joke time yet, Cody. Yeah. Yep. So, we're still praying for a revival to come down, sweep the nation. Today
Yep.
we'll be talking about American culture stuff
Oh, man,
that
yeah.
isn't kingdom culture, and we just want to be praying that we stop accepting less than what the kingdom has to offer
Yeah.
and what the Lord is willingly inviting us into.
I'm highly anticipating this episode. I'm also really, I don't know. There's a lot of places we could go with this, but I'm trying to decide which ones are going to be beneficial to our audience and which ones will not be.
Yeah.
But anyways, to that point, since we're talking about prayer points, you can go ahead and pray for all of the things that we talk about in this episode.
Yeah.
Because the reason we even felt like we needed to do this episode is that there's a lot of these aspects of American culture that are just taken for granted, even within the church. And we're supposed to be set apart and holy and different from the culture.
Yep.
Everything we talked about in the last 2 episodes is supposed to be our culture. But I don't know. You have to know what the difference is between the kingdom culture and your home culture before you can differentiate and lay down your own ideas, and because you have to know what they are before you can let go. So
True that.
there's a lot of these ideas in the church and in America in general, but it all starts with the church, So please pray for revival in the church, for awakening to just kind of for blind eyes to see kind of the cultural patterns that we're just blindly following, and for change to happen, and for people who actually care about the church and see these issues, because I know a lot of people who see these issues who don't care about the church, and I know a lot of people who care about the church but don't see the issues, and we need more middlemen, you know. So, pray for that.
Yep, we want to separate the kingdom of darkness from the kingdom of light and
Amen.
be able to recognize them and love what he loves and hate what he hates and
Set aside
so
perishable for the imperishable.
true that. So just be praying for that, and as we go through these things, be like, Lord, is this a thing in me? Like that's what I think both of us have been doing is I'm like, oh man, I definitely have all of these same tendencies.
Yeah. If it makes you angry, there's probably still some remnant of it within inside you, or you see it and like recognize it somewhere. Yeah, which if my tone sounds at all condescending or angry within either of these two parts of the culture series, it's not towards any person.
Yep.
It's just that I'm passionate about not blindly following these things anymore because I've done it for so long.
Yeah.
And I don't want to settle.
Yep. We're seeing the difference between like stepping into kingdom culture even just here recently, and then like how much life that brings and gives versus just accepting what you were kind of told in the first place. And
yeah, you can find someone to tell you what your ears are itching to hear.
True that.
You know, but is it the truth? Are we interpreting scripture correctly? You know?
Yep.
But all that to say, American culture. Culture episode part 2. Oh, but first.
Dad jokes.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I could tell a really long joke.
Yeah.
Joke.
Perfect. Wow.
This is your captain speaking. And this is your captain shouting.
If I ever worked on a plane. Oh, man.
Hold on. One more. What's a sea monster's favorite snack?
What?
Chips and dip.
Perfect. I was thinking sea biscuits.
They might be on the ship.
I think that's a horse movie.
Yeah. Sea monsters have to consume a titanic amount of food to sustain all that
Oh, wow.
blubber. You know what I'm saying? Didn't see that one coming,
Did
did you?
not. Did not. Well, there's your Dad Jokes with Cody segment. Hope you enjoyed that. Just let us know. Hit like and subscribe.
And I hope that everyone that you tell that to appreciates it just as much as you did. Or lack thereof.
Oh, man. If you rolled your eyes, you know how to get people to roll their eyes. It's perfect. All right. Jumping in to the meat. Here we go. All right. We're going to try to keep this down to one episode, I think, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're already at 15 minutes, so there's no telling.
So this is part 2, part 1. This is the American culture segment. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right. One
Disclaimer.
thing. Yeah.
We are not experts on sociology or
or basically anything.
anything at all other than, no, I wouldn't even say I'm an expert on Jesus. But that is the one thing that I've studied the most.
True.
And I can tell the difference in a lot of scenarios between Jesus and American culture. So that's what we'll be focusing on, not like the science of culture, but the practice thereof. And
yeah, because you can always get into crazy deep philosophy stuff. As I was trying to look up a couple different things about this all, and I was like, that is way too deep for our podcast.
We want to have this be available to the layman, so
yeah,
and to us even. So we should probably recap, though, real quick by also saying another disclaimer about culture. So culture is a ton of things.
Yep.
It's like a really vague definition. It's basically like every thing that a group of people believes and takes for granted, and the way that they view the world and existence, and also their traditions, their art, their history, their food, pretty much everything that separates one group of people from another is culture.
Yep. And something that you said was that it's taken for granted, and I think that was something that I thought to note, is just that most of the things, specifically on the like thought and value side, which we'll mainly be focusing in on, it's not conscious usually. You're like, yeah, this is just the right way to think. This is the right way to act. This is, of course, this is a value. Like, it's not even something you question. But literally all of that is based on your culture. If you were to go to, like, East Asia or something, they have very different value systems that are, like, noticeably, like, comparatively different.
Like, I was just in Thailand, for instance. Here we're really careful about we're driving unless it's someone who's drunk. But in Thailand, they have this more fatalistic mindset because they believe in karma, where it's like, if anything happens to you, it's because you did something to deserve it, or your former life did something to where you now deserve it, you know? So they have scooters everywhere in Thailand, and they have like the highest scooter death rate. It's either that's the highest like cause of death in the country, or they just have the highest scooter death rate in the world or something. Anyways, dying on a scooter is a big deal there. Like, it happens a lot because people, like, riding around in our little covered truck, people just drive straight out into traffic without looking, because there's this idea, like, if I get hit by a car, it's because I did something wrong, not because I didn't look both ways. Like, if you're going to get hit by a car, it's going to happen anyways. Yeah. So their mindset is, like, you know, much less cautious in some ways, because it's like, I deserve this if something happens. Whereas in American culture, it's like this idea of individualism and having control of our own destinies and being our own bosses and everything. You know, it's just very individualistic. So even the idea of having an American culture might seem kind of weird if you're like, but we all have our own culture, you know? Like, there are a lot of cultures within America because of the individualistic culture that we have. Yeah. But that in and of itself is a culture.
Yeah.
So.
True that. So, yep. A lot of these things might be things that you've just, like, never even thought of, but you're like, wait a second.
Yeah,
that's not how everybody is, you know?
I was thinking we should call this episode, like, American Culture. It goes without saying, you know? It's like it goes without saying that everyone has unalienable rights granted by God. And we'll get to that.
Yep. So I think one thing to note as well is just that you have the kingdom culture, which is Jesus, right?
Yep.
Everything else would be the kingdom of darkness, like would be under Satan and what he is wanting, regardless of what shape it takes form. So a lot of times people will think like, well, you know, at least we like kind of have this pretense of Christianity, or like we have this idea that we're like more civilized or something. Mm-hmm. And so those cultures in East Asia, for instance, are like arguably less good. But in reality, again, like we talked about last episode, like that's not how the Lord judges things. Yeah. And he's got to be our definition of reality. And so what it actually ends up being is like, regardless of what shape it takes, if you're not with God, like it's just bad. Like even if you align yourself with all these moral things, and we'll get into some of the stuff later, but even if you align yourself with this certain moral standard that you claim to be God, if you're not actually with God, it's just as bad as if you threw all those morals out the window. Like, and that's just the way it is, and that's going to be hard, I think, for people to accept, but that kind of just needs to be understood and reemphasized as
Yeah.
we're moving forward.
Yeah, there's not a moral standard outside of the kingdom. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, more or less. But it's like our righteousness is just filthy rags anyways. So.
Yeah, that's even like a whole philosophy thing is like basically you can't make a wrong choice if there's not already like a standard for morality.
Yeah.
And America's whole thing here is like each person has the freedom to decide for themselves. So the mindset is there isn't a standard in America. It's whatever any person thinks is best.
Mm.
And
as long as
so-
it doesn't infringe too much
yeah,
on the other
as long as
people.
it doesn't make anyone else, which is funny because I don't know. It's like that's still a morality.
Yeah.
So we are still infringing upon rights by saying that we're not going to infringe upon rights. You know, so it's even a double standard in our own eyes. But
yeah.
I do want to say there is a reality that here in America we have a lot more opportunity to be open in our worship, and because of our background and the nominal Christianity that we hold to in our culture, there is a lot more availability of the gospel and of Jesus in general
Mm-hmm.
to the public than there is in countries where the spread of the gospel is restricted on principle.
Yeah.
So we do have that going for us. So I'm not saying that we don't have advantages and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have like benefits and opportunities that other cultures don't have. I am saying that American culture is not better than any one culture, objectively speaking. And also that just because our government says that we're Christian or like our country in general claims to be Christian, that doesn't mean like anything in God's eyes. Like there won't be a perfect government until Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
But we also believe that Jesus asks us to be in submission to the government that we are under. So like he says, give to God what is God, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Caesar was the government that he was under at the time, and that the Jewish people were under that he was talking to. So we are still under American authority. Paul talks about respecting the authorities that God has put in place. I believe that God has put our government in place just like every other government, and that he has reasons for doing that. Are you thinking about that?
If not, you can argue with Paul.
Yeah. And that he has reasons for doing that. And
Is that Romans 12, 11, 12, 13?
I don't know. We
in
can
there somewhere.
cross-reference that or something.
It's okay.
But anyway,
All that being said, all the disclaimers.
so if you want to do your own research on like being in submission to authority and to what extent and like stuff, you can do that. Just make sure that you're like actually going to scripture and being objective and not just finding some voice to tell you what you want to hear. Because you can take one verse and you can have someone who interprets it one extreme and someone who interprets another extreme, basically just to support whatever opinion they have. But I think when we look at scriptures objectively, there's definitely a clear distinction to some submission to authority on some level, and that's because we're not under that authority, but we need to reach people who are, and like righteousness is more important than our own rights, basically.
Yeah.
So
True that.
I'm not saying there aren't instances where we should disagree with the authorities put in place, but it's out of relationship with Jesus and out of intimacy and not principle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, all that being said, we are not against America or the American government in general. But within the church, there are aspects of American culture that we should reject and that we should not settle for, that are not healthy kingdom mindsets. Those are what we want to talk about, and we want to kind of shed some light on those. So,
All right, so the underlying philosophy is where we're going to start out. So, Cody, what is the underlying philosophy of American culture? / this is probably true of a lot of the world, but anyways.
So the underlying philosophy of American culture that's true of all of the world's cultures is we look at the world and we make decisions about who God is and who we are. And that's wrong because the world is not our standard. God is our standard. The world was created by God and comes from God, and everything in the world that's not of God is not our standard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we said in the last part of this series, we're supposed to look at God and then make decisions about ourselves and the world based on what we see from God and what we hear from God. That's the only way we can look at something and say this is evil objectively, is because we already know what God is, and we know that it's not like God. So we know that it's evil, because anything that does not come from God is evil, and anything that does not proceed from faith is sin.
Yep.
So it's
true that.
And we get faith by looking at God and understanding who he is and trusting him.
Intimacy.
Yep. So since we look at the world, another kind of global aspect of our fallen situation as humanity, our main underlying sin within, our main underlying problem in looking at the world instead of God is pride.
Yeah.
So you see that a lot in every culture, but I feel like it's especially prevalent in American culture, where you're like, I can decide for myself better than God can.
Yeah.
Like, I can make better judgments about what's right, and I can make better decisions about what I should do with my life. So I shouldn't look at God first. I should look at the facts and then make decisions myself instead of asking God for his ideas and his thoughts and his decisions, because I can probably make a better decision.
Yeah, which is that whole initial point, too, I think, of, at least in my mind, of that, like, looking at the world and letting it, like, that make decisions is that same thing you're talking about there.
Yeah.
And it's all from your own standpoint and deciding things, which I think is what we see when we look in Genesis 3 and we see the fall, and, like, we see that God created it to be set up from the place of, like, learning from him. Like, we don't know good and evil apart from him. But what Satan says is, like, and it's good for gaining wisdom.
Yeah.
Among the things that he says. And it says specifically that, like, Eve looks at it and sees that it is good for gaining wisdom, and that we'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And so there's this aspect of, like, that's literally what they were choosing, was to make decisions on their own. And that is pride, like, thinking that you and your decision making and your perspective is, you know, more right than the Lord's, or that you have some entitlement even to have your own perspective apart from what the Lord's is.
Yeah, which I will say, even when we do look at the world and make decisions for ourselves, we're not even really making our own decisions. We're just, like, subscribing to already existing opinions.
Yeah.
And, you know,
yeah, we kind of just pick from the pool that we see, and we're like, this one seems
this
the most
lie
right.
seems good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like somebody else already had this idea. I'm just believing them. So, you know, I don't know. I guess there's the aspect of, like, I made that decision, but
yeah,
that's kind of the whole reason. Okay, I'll touch on this briefly, but the whole reason we even have the choice is because that is love, and that's what God wanted for us to begin with. That's why he put the tree in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, was because we needed to have a choice to obey him and be in relationship, or to disobey him. And so, obviously, we chose to make our own decisions, and here we are. And the only way that you can actually love someone is if you have the choice and they have the choice, and you both choose, then that's love. And we'll get into love in a little bit. But coming back to pride, it kind of, so the way we see that pride and that making decisions for ourselves in American culture is there's this idea of independence. Like, I'm my own person, I make my own way in life, and I need to find myself, I need to figure out who I am, you know. I need to make sure that there are pictures of myself all over the internet for people to see, and
Yeah.
I need to get my 15 minutes of fame. And even if you aren't like on that side, there's like this other side of pride that's like, I'm not good enough, I'll never be anything great, or I'm so hurt I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like kind of settling in that place. Like, it's okay to be hurt and it's okay to like have doubts about yourself, but again, we're like looking at the wrong thing there, and we're
Yeah.
settling for something less than Jesus. Like,
Yep.
if we go to Jesus, then we understand who we are rightly, and we can operate in humility instead of pride, and see ourselves the way God does, and be willing to be known the way that God sees us, which is perfect humility.
Yeah, and I see independence, I think, a lot being kind of a defense mechanism for people.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people that come into our schools that I've noticed are like particularly have kind of a stronghold of independence, I would say.
Uh-huh.
It's because they've been hurt a lot, and they have like a whole heck ton of trauma, and they're in a sense afraid to like get close, and they don't trust people, and there's like all of these insecure places in their heart, and that typically plays out in the way of like, well, I just got to do it myself, I got to figure it out on my own, you know. And I think
Mhm.
most of us, if we're honest, have had this in our lives because our culture, it's so prevalent in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so it's just easier in every way and less vulnerable for us to just do it ourselves.
And because there's this independence, it's kind of self-multiplying.
Yeah.
Like, the more independence there is, the more differing opinions there are out there, and the more perspectives there are. And suddenly we're in like this tornado of ideas and opinions and polarized,
Yeah.
statements, and everybody has to know what they believe, or you're just going to get swept away. And if
Mhm.
you don't know what you believe, then you better believe what I believe, or else we're enemies,
Yeah.
There's no middle ground in America. There's like, you need to be on one side or the other, and you're going to have friends or enemies accordingly. And that's just kind of like an underlying concept to our culture. You can see it anytime you get on Facebook. And
Yeah. True that.
while not everyone ascribes to these ideas, they're underlying generally accepted principles
Yep.
of our culture. But
Yep, and even looked on as good and strong, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, you've been hurt. Well, you know what? You don't need anybody else. You go and do your own thing.
the
you
whole
know?
idea of being strong is just our culture.
Yeah.
God does not call for strong people. In fact, strength is, if anything, an inhibitor to the Lord working.
Yeah.
Like, all the time, he's like, my strength is made perfect in your weakness.
Yeah.
And he chooses the weak people to accomplish the mighty things, and he chooses the dumb people to shame the wise.
Yeah.
So, like, being strong isn't even a value of the kingdom, because
True
we
that.
ascribe God's strength.
Yep.
So all the superheroes in American culture, all the pop stars, all the fame, that's meaningless. It's not part of the kingdom. Being famous means nothing. It gets you nowhere. Having tons of power and strength only makes you more empty, because you thought you would get something that you're not getting, and you still have this emptiness that only Jesus can fill.
Yeah.
So I think that also touches on the kind of the fame and the like climbing the ladder that we see in our country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all there is to life is getting more money, getting a nicer house, a nice car, a wife and 2.5 kids and a dog. And
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all kind of based, like, even within that, it's based in our own heads. Like, it's based on, like, what we feel and what we rationalize as being good or bad. And we're meant to, like, feel things and rationalize things, but it's meant to be brought into the context of submission to the Lord.
yeah.
And it's a known fact, both in the world and the church, wherever, that, like, our brains are pretty easily tricked. And they have an entire show, what's that, Mind Games or something, that's like...
Mind games, there's brain games. There's a couple different ones.
Yeah, well, so there's shows that are even about how our brains get tricked and stuff. And so, like, it's kind of commonly known that, like, we're not the most solid as far as our brains interpreting the information coming in. So we have to have this higher source of like translating for us like what is actually happening. But
Yeah.
you basically just take that out of the equation, so you're left to your own devices, which are like scientifically proven to be not accurate and
Yeah.
always trustworthy. So
We have a very limited understanding in comparison to God, who has all the understanding
yeah,
and all the knowledge. So,
which is how we get to this place of the next point, where like truth is relative, being a prevalent thing in our culture today.
so there's this idea in American culture that what's true for me isn't necessarily true for you. And I think that's the most prevalent within kind of the scientific community and the college community, which seems kind of crazy to me, because you would think that like the most educated spheres of society would be like, truth is truth. But, you know, it's truth until it conflicts with their underlying philosophy of what life is and where we come from.
Yeah.
We want to decide for ourselves when life happens, even within reproduction. We want to decide for ourselves what gender means. We want to decide for ourselves what marriage is and when we can get divorced. And we want to decide for ourselves where we come from even. We have all these different theories. And now there's lots of Eastern culture here as well, with like Spiritism and
Yeah.
mysticism and
Yeah.
all kinds of weird cults from the East.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Buddhism is on the rise.
Buddhism is
here.
on the rise.
It's weird.
Islam. None of these things are worse than any others. They're all wrong.
Yeah.
But nobody, like, people are looking for truth, but it makes it harder when you go looking for truth and you're told there isn't objective truth.
Yeah.
So you should just settle for something that sounds good to you. And there's so many options for religion that people are like, oh, I guess not one of these is true. It's just whatever sounds the best to you, because you can just decide what you believe for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging. I mean, choosing for ourselves is definitely an aspect of God's character and heart, but that doesn't mean that we should pretend that something's true that isn't. And that being said, I don't think that we should polarize either. And polarizing means going to one extreme and staying there completely, and either rejecting or attracting people who believe the same as you or don't. Like, we're not called to reject people who don't believe the truth. We're not called to reject people who believe the truth, but we are called to speak the truth and to proclaim the truth. And the truth is objective, and it's Jesus. So don't be afraid to speak that out, regardless of what culture says. Like, and that moves us into the point of challenge being seen as like rude or bad in our culture, because my truth isn't your truth. So it's wrong for you to try to disrupt my belief system and like interrupt my headspace by like imposing your truth upon me. Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
But if we really believe that Jesus is the truth, and that these people don't believe the truth and are going the wrong way and are going to perish, isn't it more loving to reach out to them with the truth and give them the opportunity of rejecting us still, but at least they've heard it, you know? And so if that's truly our perspective, and we're really coming from a place of, I care about you and you believe the wrong thing, and I want you to know the truth, even if you reject it and you reject me and it hurts my reputation, I'm willing to take that chance for the possibility that you might hear and you might believe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I'm going to point out kind of the Matrix being a thing, which in some senses they, I think, did on purpose. But anyways, like, you know, you have all these people that are in a computer program, but in reality they're just being harvested to like feed these like weird machine things. I don't know. I don't remember how it all works exactly. But there's this idea of like would you want to know you were in that, basically, you know?
Yeah.
Or the Lord, for me, like, recently kind of gave me this picture of, like, you know, somebody's, like, got a bomb strapped to their leg. Are you going to just be like, it's probably fine. Like, they might not want to know. And even if they didn't want to know, even if you knew that they didn't want to know, would you not still be like, hey, there's literally a bomb strapped to your leg? Like, I don't care what you're saying. Like, I see that there's a bomb strapped to your leg. It's about to explode. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's an objective reality of a bomb being strapped to their leg, even if they want to ignore it. So it's just kind of this interesting thing with the confrontation thing in particular, where it's like people are afraid to, but Jesus was not afraid to. And that's what he does basically the entire time he's here.
So there will be backlash against holding to a truth and proclaiming it as true, but Jesus said that that would happen.
Yep.
And also, that's where love being sacrificed comes into play. Like, if you really love someone, you won't care if there's backlash. Like, no matter what the cost, you're going to be willing to go out of your way to become uncomfortable and to risk your reputation and put everything on the line to tell someone that they're going the wrong way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, Jesus came knowing he was going to die. Like, on some level, yes, that was his purpose, but he still came and was, like, preaching this message, knowing that, like he could come in 1,000 other ways that would look better for his reputation.
Yeah.
But he's going to come and he's going to operate in a way and call people out in a way that they're going to hate him and they're going to mock him and they're going to disrespect him in all kinds of ways, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he even says, like, they called me demon possessed and they've hated me. Like, how much more are they going to despise you? You know, and so there's this aspect of, like, within Christianity that you just can't escape that. Otherwise, you're probably not doing it the way Jesus was doing it.
Yeah.
But
and there is a reality of there being self-righteous or angry Christians out there. I know a few who would, because they believe something is true, rather than challenging people from a place of love, they kind of, like, dismissively just beat them over the head with it. And I don't know, you see, like, sideways comments and, like, just making fun of people who don't believe the same things as you. That's not Jesus. And, like, there are people within the church who either experience that and walk away from the church, or they experience that someone self-righteous kind of rubbing their face in their different beliefs from them. And then they're like, oh, I don't want to challenge anyone with Jesus because that's not loving. And what if they get turned off by Jesus because I tried to tell them what to do and I confronted them? And that's not the reality of what it looks like. And even if it is, like, they're rejecting Jesus.
yeah.
And they're consciously doing it. They had that chance. Now, wouldn't it be better that they had that chance, assuming that you're actually coming from a place of love, than that they just assume that they're going the right way, even though they somewhere inside just don't, like, fully feel right about it, you know? But even if they were fully convinced they were going the right way, they're not. And we can be nice people as much as we want to, but I know plenty of nice people who don't know anything about Jesus.
Yep.
And Jesus was not nice. He was kind, but he wasn't nice. By the culture standards anyways. Like, he offended the Pharisees a lot. And there was one time his disciples were even, like, at a point where they were like, does he realize that he offended the Pharisees? They're like, I don't think he even knows that he's offending them.
Yeah.
And then what does Jesus say after they say that?
Well, he basically says, he's like, don't worry about them, like, in a sense of, like, don't worry about them being offended. And then he says something, there might be another thing or two he says, but I remember the key point I remember there being that he's like, my Father will uproot anything that is not, like, that he didn't plant, basically. Like, anything that didn't come from him, from the Father, like, he's going to uproot. And so in a sense of like not being worried about offending people, because in the end it's all going to be uprooted anyways, so you might as well try,
Yeah.
you know.
It would be better if it was uprooted now and there was a chance for something else to be planted
Yeah.
than for it to just mature and come to fruition as judgment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Which moves us into the next point of our love here. Like we're talking about Jesus being loving and kind of what that looks like. But our love here in America is like very the opposite, to the point where we look at Jesus and we're like, oh, Jesus, that was kind of harsh. Like that was kind of a jerk move. Like, why would you say that? But like Jesus is perfect theology. Like Jesus is what love looks like as a human. And so looking at that, we in comparison we see that American love is super selfish and self-focused and kind of just feeds that independence that we talked about before. It's feeling based, and your feelings are considered what is true and right. Like your feelings are considered the love. And you see this in movies and stuff a ton, like that's like, oh, well, wait till you have this feeling, or like, I just don't have this feeling, instead of the feelings being a result of love. And so that's just a huge thing, and it's super relative to like the immediate surroundings. Like as soon as your wife is like unappealing to you or does something that makes you mad, you're like, well, I just don't love her anymore. I'm just not in love with her anymore. And it's this like just utterly ridiculous thing. But yeah, there's no forgiveness, there's no surrender, there's no confrontation or challenge like we've been talking about. So we can kind of break a couple of these things down, but one thing I want to touch on is the forgiveness thing in particular. Just that like we have a kind of a shadow of forgiveness in our culture, but it's so, it like kind of completely misses the point of forgiveness, and it's still selfish. It's like forgive them in a sense of like, I don't even know. It's like forgive but don't forget. But that literally is the definition of forgiveness as presented by the Lord. Like as if it never happened. And we talked about this in the last episode, so we don't need to jump too far into it. But
yeah, American culture says, I forgive you, but now I know the real you underneath, so I need to be careful that I don't put myself in harm's way by associating with you further.
yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you yelled at me. There's got to be a little more space there now, you know?
So I'm not even really sure what forgiveness means in that context. Like you get over them on some like, you get over whatever on some like kind of surfacey face level, but like it doesn't really have a whole lot of impact. Like you're still treating that person based on this thing. So,
well, if you just think about it in the feelings aspect, it's like, yeah, I've let it go feeling wise and I don't feel bad about you anymore, but
yeah, I guess that's what it would come down to.
But there's still the actions portraying your selfishness as well.
Yeah.
If you've talked to the Lord about it and felt like you were supposed to put distance between yourself and someone else, that's different. Just like everything talking to the Lord is. If you tell me you talked to the Lord and he told you to do something, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
Unless it's like clearly in defiance of Scripture. But Jesus' definition of forgiveness is 70 times 7. And I don't think you can get to 70 times 7 if you put a little more space in there every time you get hurt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You get to like 7 and you're like, okay, we've reached the ultimate point of space. You are now over there. I'm over here. I can still forgive whatever actions you do, but there'll be a lot less chance of that happening because you're way farther away from me. Mm-hmm. There's a big cushion here to where I won't be hurt anymore, and I can comfortably forgive you from behind 6 meters of solid rock, you know?
Yeah. And there's always this line that people draw where they're like, well, that's as long as you're not put in harm's way. And again, last episode we kind of touched on how like Jesus continuously puts himself in harm's way.
He does.
But he also says like turn the other cheek, Like if somebody wants your cloak, like give them your shirt as well or something. And like if somebody wants you to go a mile with them, like go a whole nother mile with them.
Yeah.
Like there's this idea of like you continuously putting yourself out there, not drawing back, the opposite of drawing back. You're turning your other cheek. You are putting yourself in harm's way again, knowing that this has happened before, you know? And so,
Yeah, and if this is a hard or dangerous thing, definitely talk to Jesus about it beforehand.
Yep.
And I would advise you to have like a mature Christian friend to talk about these things with before you commit to any actions. Just, you know, but I would say lean towards the side of true and deep forgiveness, which means no record of wrongs.
love is not sacrificial in any way, which is kind of an interesting thing in general, because people like the idea of some amount of sacrifice and love, but in reality, like
They
all
want to be sacrificed for. They
Yeah.
don't want to sacrifice for someone else.
Yeah, nobody wants to be that person, and so it's all like, okay, I got to take care of myself first. Like I got to be good before I can ever attend to you or your needs or anything. And I think I see this a lot, particularly in the Christian realm with money stuff. There's this idea of like, you can give and you can do whatever, but you have to make sure like all your ducks are in a row first. And it's this whole idea rather than this like sense of Jesus like going after it, you know? And so it's, I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And not that we want to dive into money stuff, I think, a whole lot, but it's just like that as an illustration too. Like oftentimes we're like, oh, well, we have to be good before we can do anything else. It's like you should be solid with the Lord first. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But like as soon as that happens, that doesn't mean that like your life is entirely put together. It just means like you and your identity is solid with the Lord.
Yeah, that comes back to our idea of American strength.
Yeah.
And with that, if you're ever wrong, then you're just proving that you were actually weak to begin with, and that you're not trustworthy. There's all these implications that come with being wrong. But I think that thing you're just talking about, that concept of needing to wait, comes from this idea of I can't be wrong, or I might totally screw somebody else up. I might ruin everything, you know.
Yeah.
But God chooses to use people, and he knows we're weak.
Yep.
So he's not afraid of you being wrong. You are way more afraid of being wrong than he is. We'll be wrong a lot more often than we want to be, obviously. But we need to be okay with that, and we need to be willing to hear correction and to grow in the Lord and to accept in humility that, oh, I was wrong. I thought this was true, but it's actually not. And that's okay, because there's grace, and God like walks with us as we go. He meets us where we're at. And sometimes, all the time, that's not perfection.
Yeah.
But again, this is a target that we're aiming for, and not a requirement that we need to meet in order to get into heaven.
Yeah. I think another aspect of love is how often we give what we call love, but it's actually just for our own gain.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just a thing that like the underlying goal typically of what we do is ourselves and promoting ourselves and contentment and comfort. And maybe that for other people, but only after we've obtained that.
And only if it makes us feel good.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, in 1 John it says, like, God is love. And that if you don't know God, then you don't know love. So if you aren't intimately walking with the Lord and seeing how he loves you, you are not capable of loving somebody else. You cannot give what you do not have. And so anything else that we're trying to call love that is aside from intimacy, being rooted in intimacy with the Lord, isn't love. It just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can argue with the scripture and the Lord if you want to, but like, it's not love. It's a shadow. It's probably codependency. It's me, like, I tell my wife I love her so that she tells me that she loves me. You
and
know,
then I'm okay because now I feel good.
exactly. And so,
But yeah,
so I think this is a much larger underlying problem than
yeah.
we most
Like the
realize.
reason we have divorce and cheating and broken families in America is because, I'm not going to say this is the only reason actually, but the main reason is because, are we getting married because we actually love the other person or because we love the way that they love us?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm only with you because I'm receiving something from you, and you're receiving something from me, but you're only receiving something from me because I'm receiving something from you. Or is it this idea of Hosea and Gomer that God shows us as his example of love, where it's, I love you and I want your best, and that means that I'm going to be with you regardless of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because when I say I love you, it means that I want to give everything for you, and I want to make sure that you have the very best, and I'm committed to your best instead of mine.
Yeah.
Like, even if you betray me and you go and you prostitute yourself out again, I'll still be here when you change your mind and come back.
Yeah.
And it will be as if that never happened, because that's the way that God loves us, and that's his definition of love. And that's our goal. That's our aim.
And there's so many. I mean, this is like the whole Bible is the Lord
Yeah.
going after people who constantly go back to the world and constantly don't pay attention to him.
Like me.
Yeah. I'm like, I feel it. And I am thankful for said love. And so in the same way, like, the kingdom value is love in the way that the Lord has it. And that is not what we see, even in your movies and all this other stuff. Like, it's just not
Yeah.
what you're being shown. So with that, a lot of times knowing that we are the goal, like our contentment and comfort is the goal. Like, we're trying to be okay. We're trying to be good. That knowing that that's our goal, that's where we try and derive our identity from. And that's what our goal is in trying to, like, build up our identity in these different things. And so we see that our identity we often base in what we do and associate with, and our appearance and just general performance.
There are aspects of our contentment and our comfort that are not even thinkable that we should ever give up.
Yeah.
Like, entertainment has lulled so many Americans to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even funny. Like, just living for the next TV series, the next movie, the next video game, the next
Yep.
sports game.
And that was us. I mean,
Yeah.
like, we get
Like, I
it.
told you my story in the last episode. But and a lot of that's still in here. Like, I'm still fighting it, but the important part is that we are fighting it, that we're not just settling for, Jesus is good, but I'm tired and I need to rest, so I think I'm just gonna veg out tonight, kind of binge some Netflix,
Yeah.
The Lord wants us to rest, and I just can't rest unless I'm entertained and complacent and just kind of not doing much,
Mm-hmm.
And there is an aspect of rest, but we need to let the Lord define that.
Yep.
And I think
True that.
he wants to still be with us while we're resting. And true rest comes from going to him and being with him, rather than trying to find fulfillment in things other than him.
Yeah.
Which is what we're really doing by getting lost in fantasies and stories. And I don't think stories in and of themselves are bad. I think we get a lot of our belief systems and kind of this taken for granted culture that we get comes from our entertainment in a lot of ways. And it would help us a lot if, when we did consume entertainment, that we talk about the effects that it's having on us and our belief system. Like, lately, I don't even watch a movie unless I'm trying to pick out all of the the ideas and the philosophies that I'm being fed and how it's affecting me when it's over. Like, do I feel more depressed than I did when I started out? Do I feel like I need to watch another movie now? You know, it's just, we got to be aware. We can't be asleep. Got to
Yep.
be awake.
Gotta wake up.
So just, yeah.
So, and something that we were talking about the other day is like getting a lot of identity from a lot of those things. Like I have a hat that has like Sonic the Hedgehog on it that I really like that my friend gave me. But like, I'm identifying myself with a certain like subculture there, or you know, I don't know, all these different things, and so that's why that's one reason as well that we turn to a lot of these things is because we do get identity from them. So I got identity from being a part of the gaming community, and
Yeah, me too.
liking anime, and I've like made friends via those things and have relationships that are like pretty much solely based in those things. And I'm trying to figure out how to navigate now that I don't really do any of that. But as well as like, that's why we dress the way we do. Maybe you want to fit in with a certain trend or group of people or whatever. Yeah, so I don't know, just this aspect of identity kind of within all of these things. And it's not from who Jesus says I am, but it's from what I do, how I look, how well I perform,
Yeah.
you know, who I'm with and associate with, and kind of what like perception I can give other people about myself versus like what is actually in there typically, you know?
Yeah, it kind of starts even from like our youngest days when our well-meaning parents ask us what we want to be when we grow up. It's like,
Yeah.
and then from there, like we reach this point in our adolescent years where we're like, who am I? Like, what defines me apart from everyone else? And the very first thing we're told in our society is, you're whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
You define yourself.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, okay. Let me find the most appealing philosophies and appearances and circles to associate myself with and kind of build my own identity. And
Yeah.
there's not really any meaning in that, but there is like companionship within that, which makes it hard as well. There's like a little bit of good mixed in with all these not good things. And I have also experienced that, like, all my friends are in video games. How am I supposed to do anything without video games, you know?
Yeah.
But we're supposed to go to God for our identity, ask him who we are, what he says about the nature of us coming into existence and what we're meant to do while we're here, what will, you know, what's my purpose, who am I? Like, God answers those questions. And then we can relate to others in a healthy way, like God says to Samuel, who goes to find David at
Samuel.
Jesse's house. Yeah, like God says to Samuel, I do not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at outward appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart.
Come on.
And we need to hear that in American culture. Like, because we build our own identities, the way that we tell what other people are is, hi, my name's Cody. Oh, my name's John. Hey, John, what do you do?
Yeah, literally.
What do you like to do? What kinds of hobbies do you have? You know, what's your favorite kind of music? And we're like building this box to put this person in based on all the identities that they ascribe to.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really tell that by the way we like make snap judgments about each other based on our political standpoints, the way that we put somebody in a box based on what kind of clothing they're wearing. You know, it's just strictly outward appearances here. And even our inward landscape, like we try to mold to fit outward appearances.
Yeah.
And
I mean, and I can see that in myself. Like, if somebody comes up to me and they're wearing like a band shirt and I find out that they play Team Fortress 2 or something, I'm going to be like, friend, you know what I'm saying? Like, but you don't even think about it.
Yeah, but on the inside, they're like totally lost, don't love Jesus at all. And it's like, we have nothing in common. Why do I feel like we're best? And, you know, it's because this idea of like identity being from what we do and what we associate with instead of God.
Which I like something you said the other day about God like God not being our reference point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just thought that was really good. Like God has to be what you're looking to
Yeah.
and what other people are looking to. So kind of in a sense of how we're treating other people, like are we just validating their getting their identity from something else, which is a hard thing that like I think we've both been trying to navigate.
Yeah.
But it starts with us and ourselves being like rooted in the Lord to even know how to do any of that anyways, you know. But
So I think if we want to love people who are finding their identity in things other than Jesus, the best way we can do that is by seeing past all of the things that they align themselves with, and like the Lord says, looking at their heart and trying to figure out where they're at, what they need to hear, asking the Lord what how we can love them best.
yeah.
Like, we just need to have a deeper and more aware sense of love and of intentionality in our relationships. Like, I know you fix cars and that's the only thing that you do, but I know that you have emotions and you have desires in life, and like, I can tell that you're still looking for a purpose. And I felt like Jesus wanted me to share this with you, and then, you know,
Yeah.
but, or we can just listen to them talk about cars for 2.5 hours and walk away having made no change. And there's a certain point of like still being human and still like relating to people. Like, listening is a very important aspect of relating to someone. That doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they're saying, but if we want to know their heart, we have to know what they're saying, where it's coming from, why they're saying it. Like, we still hear what they're saying, but we're just a lot more intentional about hearing what's kind of between the lines, you know. I think is really important.
And I think something we see a lot too on this whole front, well, there's kind of a couple specific examples I thought of, but if there's like a homeless person, like they'll get hardcore judged because they're not like considered like a benefit to society, you know. And I know so many Christians that judge these people so much, but these are literally the people that Jesus went and hung out with. Like, these are the people that Jesus did his ministry to and who were most open to him, you know. And so I think there's a lot to be said there, as well as in the Christian standpoint. Like if you're you know, on the Protestant side of things, and somebody's like, well, I'm Catholic, you like immediately judge them. Like, you can't help it. That's like what you've probably been trained to do, rather than like Jesus' approach being like, hey, I'm going to sit down with you. Like, let's talk, you know, let's get some coffee.
Yeah.
Let's like get to know each other and who we are, what the Lord's doing, you know, like these different things. But in a sense, you're like looking at all these like super vague high up categories and boxes that we like to place people in, and like distance ourselves because we are insecure and want to put ourselves in a box, and we get identity from that, and we don't have to be real. We can just associate ourselves with this thing or that thing, you know, versus actually being known, and kind of like the humility stuff we talked about last episode. So
yeah,
it's just kind of crazy.
If anybody says I am, and then the next thing that comes out of their mouth has nothing to do with Jesus, then you can just pretty much disregard that entirely. I'm a football player. That's not who you are. Like, that is something that you do, but that's not who you are.
You are a child of God that plays football.
Exactly. That is what you should interpret that to in your head when you hear somebody say that.
And then treat them accordingly, because those implications are real.
Yeah. Makes a difference.
All right, next point is specifically on man's wisdom being based in the self-preservation, the comfort, and stuff that we've been talking about. But, like, anytime anybody says, like, well, that doesn't seem wise, I've noticed it is always on the side of, like, you either aren't risking anything because you're trying to protect yourself, or you're like risking enough, but it's like basically, again, in the end, you're still trying to benefit yourself.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's like a ratio of like it's worth it because you'll probably, you know, benefit in the end. And those kinds of levels of wisdom where it's like so always about you.
It's kind of selfish wisdom is what you're saying.
But a lot of times, even in Christian culture, I hear people talk about wisdom. And again, whatever, like within intimacy, the Lord could have you handle a situation any number of ways. But when somebody comes up to me and they're giving me all of this so-called wisdom that is just preaching self-preservation, then my like flags go up. Even though the Lord might have me do the exact thing you're saying to do, but the Lord's reasoning, it's from the Lord. Like it's based out of intimacy rather than like, oh, I've decided based on my own judgment that this is best or this is best. So it kind of comes back to that tree of knowledge of good and evil bit.
So what we should accept is wisdom. We should reject that as wisdom. What should we accept? What we should accept as wisdom is whatever God says is wisdom in the circumstance.
It's basically like if you were like, should I get this job or get this job? Somebody might be like, hey, you should get this job because it'll provide you a better job. It'll make more money. You'll have these benefits, blah, 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 blah. But those aren't God, like from intimacy with God reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might ask him and he does tell you to go with that job. But the point is like you're going to God for it. It's out of intimacy.
Yeah.
Not just you trying to figure things out for yourself.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between you should play it safe because it's wise, which that statement is not wise, or you should play it safe because God said so. Like specifically, like God is leading you in intimacy into being safe. That is a different scenario.
Yeah.
Like safety in and of itself is not the issue. Preservation of self is not the issue. God doesn't want us to just hurt ourselves, kamikaze. But the issue is not submitting it to God and not being willing to hear something that will detriment you is the most wise solution.
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And if it's coming from any place that's not fear of the Lord, then by definition, it is not wisdom. Even if it tries to dress itself up and appeal to your rationale, it is not wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's the litmus test for you.
Or you can have fear of man, and you can subscribe to American wisdom.
True that.
So, for instance, we have the issue of abortion in our culture. It's a super polarized topic. It's kind of like a selling point for politicians getting into office.
Yeah.
But, again, we find the problem of both sides coming with their own logic and their own wisdom instead of, I asked God and this is what he said.
Yep.
You do not have a moral stand for abortion outside of God. Don't tell me choice is more important than life or life is more important than choice unless you're saying this is what God said, because it doesn't matter. So that being said, if you are still struggling with where you stand on this, go ask Jesus what he would do, because that is your standard. And I will leave you to figure that out, because I think he has an answer for you, knowing his character and his desire to communicate with us.
And I think that has big practical implications as far as how we handle these things, because if you're trying to make systems aside from the Lord, one direction or the other, you're just going to come down to arguing those systems, which, as we see, literally doesn't help anybody. I cannot think of one time that someone's been like,
I prefer my system over intimacy.
Of course, I will now not abort my baby because you told me this is what the Bible said. Like, most people already have this general concept, right? Like, you're not going to win them over logically, more than likely. If you do, right on, whatever. But, like, the point, again, the end goal for the kingdom is intimacy every single time. And so if you're like, hey, I think, Jesus, what you're saying is that's not okay. The answer is not for me to preach that at you, or at that person, but it's to say, hey, like, do you know Jesus? Like, are you surrendered to him? Because he has more for your life than you even understand.
Yeah.
And so, like, the point, again, end goal is relationship with Jesus.
There's no point in telling somebody who's not under Jesus what Jesus says they should do because they don't care, you know?
Yeah.
Like everything that we do and everything that we hold as a standard comes from Jesus. So if they don't have a relationship with him, it doesn't matter. Like, it's a moot point.
Yep.
So,
because, I mean, even if they do it regardless, like, even if they change their mind to what you're considering the moral standard to be, they're not doing it because of Jesus. They're still not any closer to Jesus. And so at Judgment Day, it's not going to benefit them the slightest that they decided not to abort that baby.
yeah.
Because, again, the standard is, who do you know?
Yep. And then we wanted to talk about
Speaking of choice.
independence.
Yeah.
American independence in the church. There's kind of this idea that either I earn my way into heaven by doing enough good things and showing up to church enough times. Like, you have no idea how many people we've talked to and asked how their relationship with Jesus is. Like, in reference to, like, evangelism, and we're going out and praying for people, and we're like, hey, do you know Jesus? And they're like, well, I haven't been to church in a while. What does that have to do with literally anything?
Yeah.
But it's so prevalent. And
Or like, I go to church every Sunday. My church prays too. And we're like,
yeah,
that's
that's
cool.
also irrelevant.
Yeah.
But it comes from this idea of independence and, like, I have to do the right things and then I get into heaven.
Yeah.
But you could do all the wrong things and still be in relationship with Jesus, and you're still in.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of this weird thing. And you see this in the cultural level in general, where, like, you have to make a way. Nobody's going to help you. You have to fight your own battles. And so we've done that with the Lord, too, where we're like, Jesus said the thing. He told us what's up. Now we just have to do it and do our best. And, like, there's, like, zero, like, actual God wants to help you do anything.
Uh-huh.
Even though the Bible's like, the Lord wants to carry you like a father carries his child. He wants to go before you and fight your battles, and you just pick up the spoils. Like, I only do what I see the Father doing. Like, it's the whole message of the Bible is being with God, yet somehow we've turned it into, like, just try your hardest to be a good person. Right, next one is leadership. It's all about getting ahead, being on top, even at the sacrifice of others, which is so not Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
Which we kind of talked about, like, servant leadership and stuff in the last one, but Jesus, it's like the opposite. It's like, I'll be the floor mat for you, as Paul says, and then, like, that's where, you know, like, true leadership is. Like, Jesus didn't come in and have positional power in the sense of having authority. He came in a manger as a wee babe, you know.
A wee babe.
A wee babe. And he's got relational authority that comes from serving and stuff versus, like, I'm in a palace. Now you all have to listen to me because I have the power and can ruin all of you, you know. It's like he comes in and is like, hey, I'm going to wash your feet. And you're like, man, I respect this guy so stinking much,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Like, knowing who he is and how awesome he is, and he's here, like, scrubbing my feet down, which are disgusting, you know. But here we see leadership's all about smushing people down and trying to be the tallest person, you know.
Yeah. Like, you can't get into politics. You can't get very far in politics without, like, climbing over other people, you know?
Yeah.
You don't make it to the top unless God puts you there. You don't make it to the top by serving others. But that's so beside the point. Like, leadership isn't even about getting to the top or advancing in the kingdom, but here it is, and we don't want to subscribe to that.
What do you think it would look like if, say, like a political candidate was like, instead of having those ads that are like bashing somebody, they're like, hey, we actually love this person. They're super cool, and they're made in the image of God. Like, I just wonder what effect that would have, you know?
Yeah. You wouldn't have to be, you'd have to be, like, not a political person.
Yeah, basically.
And then doing that might miraculously result in you becoming a
People would be like, let's
politician.
vote for that guy.
Yeah, I don't. It would be like one of those. This guy for president. This guy for president.
Man.
I don't think it would
But yeah, it
work.
wouldn't even be like
outside
you
of, like,
trying.
God, yeah.
Oh,
But
that's
anyway,
crazy.
it'd be
Anyways,
so crazy.
next topic is family.
Family.
And again, talked about
All
most of
my
these things last
brothers,
episode.
sisters, and me.
But I've noticed family here tends to be pretty surfacey, and there's still independence within that. And there's only depth and even holding on to the pretense of family as long as it benefits you. Like
Yeah.
the moment that like it doesn't benefit you, you've disowned your family, you've convinced everyone they're evil, and you don't go to Christmas dinner anymore or something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, family is more like this begrudging bond. That, or it's like, oh, we're really close friends, you're my family now. But that's not the scriptural precedent.
It's funny actually too as a kid that you're like I had this idea that family was like great, and I was like holidays are great because all family gets together. And then as I got older, I realized that everybody had all these issues and didn't like each other and was super mad at each other. And
Yeah.
I mean, at least on some level. And I was like, man, my world is falling apart, you know, because I like valued this sense of family that wasn't coming from the Lord and turned out to actually be a lie, which by the way is most of our culture.
Yeah.
So
American concept, in contrast to kingdom concept of family, is, well, before there even is a family, I can connect with as many other people intimately as I want to. And if a family starts to happen, I have every right to just extinguish it, move right along. And then even when I do get married, if it's not working out, I can just leave. They can just leave. It's fine.
Yep. It happens.
Kids are more of a burden than a joy. They don't really need their parents, you know. If you're not feeling it, you can just up and leave. It's fine.
Or cart them
And-
to school or something.
Yeah. And this is an American idea. It's in other places, but there are places where they don't have this idea. It's like you are, even if begrudgingly, responsible for your family no matter what happens.
Yep.
That was like a traditional Thai concept, for instance, where they would like, you'd have 3 or 4 generations in the same house, and as you grew, you would just take care of the rest of the family, and there was kind of like this one like kind of middle-aged generation that took care of the house, and then when they got too old, the next generation would take care of the house and like the family, and we just don't have that. And even the people within the family are like so independent. Mom likes to do what she likes to do. Little Timmy likes to do what little Timmy likes to do. We kind of begrudgingly come around the dinner table for a meal, but we don't really get along that well, so we all go to our rooms at night, and it's just not an accurate representation of family. You might have a great family, which congratulations, but the fact that this is a huge pattern in the culture is evil.
Yep.
And not the standard for family that we aim for.
Yep.
Again, we're aiming for a target. We're not saying we are anywhere or that we need to be anywhere.
Next part is an exciting one. Capitalism.
Oh, man. So the only reason capitalism is bad is because it's selfish and we don't care about anyone else. Systematically, we were just saying systems don't always work and things are better coming from intimacy. So we can still operate well from a capitalistic society. Like we can still give of our resources to make sure that people don't have enough, get what they need. And we can still love our neighbors well with what we own. We can still not count things our own. But it's just a lot harder when we grow up in a culture where everything is, mine or yours. And there's such a rough distinction.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we should be entitled to anyone else's things. And I don't think any other system of societal structure would actually work better on this side of heaven. But we are saying that capitalism is not the ideal.
Yep.
Jesus is the ideal. We don't really have that option available to us as a physical government currently, but his political ideology is perfect. No other one is, including capitalism. And what's yours is not yours. You are in charge of it, but it belongs to God, and he's given it to you for a purpose and for a season. Someday it may not be yours, so don't get attached to it.
Yeah.
Don't love your things, just have them. Make sure that they benefit other people. And, like, it's a lot more communal than we like to think.
Yep.
Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think, there's a whole branch of philosophy that tries to battle out what form of government would actually be the most effective and like perfect in a sense.
Jesus.
And so staying away from that whole front and not saying like on a greater level that we should do this or that, but looking at on an individual basis, like we see that we gain certain values when we don't realize that this is what's happening. And so it is a system that's based on like you earning what you get, and like you work hard, you earn a lot, you don't work hard, you don't earn a lot, like this whole kind of concept.
Exactly.
And it's not even like, even that is not inherently bad within itself, but it's like, it's not rooted in Jesus is again what it comes down to. Like you are now like selfishly holding on to your things in reality because you're insecure and because you find identity in your things. But like recognizing that it has these unhealthy tendencies of independence and these things, rather than like freely you've received, so freely give. Like you don't get that anywhere. And this is where we start putting that some of that identity stuff we were talking about earlier. Like I've heard so many people be like, well, you know, that homeless person should just get a job, as if that's like the key point of their identity. Like that's the only thing that they'll say in passing. Not like, hey, I wonder if that person knows Jesus. It's, oh, that person should get a job. Like, where are you thinking?
Or even, I bet that person needs money. Like that's well-meaning, but again, we're still just seeing their financial need, and we're not even seeing them as a person.
Yeah.
And we're not societal activists here or political activists. I don't know. We're not activists. We're not saying we need to change the American culture.
Yeah.
The culture comes from the people. Like if the people change, the culture will. That's not even what we're aiming for, although that would be ideal, obviously. But we can't be blind to the culture that we live in. Like we are called to have our own culture as the kingdom. And we don't do that by changing the American culture. We do that by changing our own culture, by adopting the principles that God's laid out for us, and by operating in intimacy with him and making that our culture and our identity, and not just taking for granted that these norms that we see in America are what is reality and what is truth and what is good. Because everybody, everywhere that somebody lives, they have the tendency to assume that the opinions and the culture that they grew up with is the right one. So that's not unique to America. We are a little less connected and like outward focused than some smaller countries or, you know, poorer countries, but everybody has a tendency to assume that where they live is the best.
Yep.
So just as you're recognizing these things, just ask the Lord what that means for you personally. And then if you feel like you want to bring any of these things up with your friends or your family, then you can do that out of relationship. Or even if you are a societal activist, I don't care, you do what you want. But that's not our heart, and that's not what we're saying. We're just saying these are not values of the kingdom.
Next one being patriotism. This is going to be an interesting one. So we're not saying that you can't be like grateful for where you live, or like grateful, for instance, for, you know, what we have in America. Like we have nice comfortable houses and I'm sitting on a comfortable couch and some air conditioning. Like, I'm grateful for these things. But that is not my identity. And in the same way that we were just talking about, like, you not holding on to things as your own, like, I have no right to any of this. Jesus could take all of this if he wants to. And it's not beyond something that he would do, at least historically we see in the biblical narrative, where he even lets his own people get captured and taken away into captivity because they weren't operating with him. And so a lot of times I hear people say, like they'll give all this reasoning why America is great and why God loves America as a nation and, like, wants all this stuff. And maybe he does. I don't know. But in the sense of, like, thinking that we're somehow, like, above reproach from the Lord, I think is dangerous ground. But mainly the point that we wanted to talk about was, like, your identity being American and that informing your value system over the kingdom. Like, even, I mean, you'll even see where, like, I mean, I was in Boy Scouts and they claimed to have some sort of Christian something, at least they did at the time. Some, like, pretense of Christian stuff and going to church and whatever. And it always kind of bothered me that we would carry the American flag up and the, like, Christian flag, the white one with the blue little square and the red cross. And you always had to have the American flag higher than the Christian flag, which I think might actually be like there's rules for how to handle the American flag, and I think that's one of them here.
Yeah.
But, like, I felt like it really bothered me at the time because I felt like our loyalties were misaligned, and it's gotten to the point, honestly, where, like, I cringe because we're pledging allegiance to this thing that is not Jesus. Like, I'm not of this world. I'm not my own any longer. I do not get to pledge allegiance to anything that is not Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing for people because it's something that we're so, like, our brains are so soaked in being our culture, you know, and that we're raised being like, nope, you stand up when this and you do this and you know, this is the way it is and this is right. And, like, look, the pledge says something about God, so, you know, God's happy about it. And you're like,
yeah,
no, that's not how Jesus works.
You show me any verse where Jesus says anything about being loyal to Israel or Rome or anything.
Yeah.
He doesn't even get into that. He says, give to God what is God and to Caesar's what is Caesar's. And that's about the only precedent we have.
Which, interesting thing to note about that.
Oh, yeah. That part.
So you look at the coin and it's got an image of Caesar. It was made in the likeness of Caesar. So you give it to Caesar. And Jesus says, give unto God what is God's. And who is made in the likeness of God? Like, that would be us. AKA, like, we don't belong to this. Like, that money does. It's Caesar's. It's got his face on it. Go ahead and give it to him. Yep. It's not yours anyways.
Yep.
But, like, we do not get to give ourselves to anything else. Like, we rightfully belong to the Lord, you know? Yeah, I felt like the Lord told me that once, and I was, like, just wrecked.
You, like, look at yourself, and it's like, whose face is on it, and whose inscription?
Oh,
and
God.
it's like, God's. Yeah.
Oh, man. So, we're just saying, don't get your identity from being American.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is you are American as much as you're...
If you are.
A person or a man or a woman. Yeah, if you are. You might be Australian or whatever. But you're, like, again, you're a child of God who is American. You're not an American who's a Christian.
Yeah.
And I don't care what the rules are on which flag comes higher. That's the fact. Is, you know.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, that does make me cringe as well. And I would almost rather not put up an American flag than be forced to make it higher than the, you know, even, I don't care about flags that much. But I'm like, if it's going to be symbolic, I don't want this to be the symbolism that I'm representing.
Yeah, obviously, I'm like, I don't really care what piece of fabric is where. I don't think this one necessarily. Jesus is like, yes, this is my flag. Yeah. You know, but, like, if it's symbolic.
Yeah, I understand the respect for, like, the people who've gone before us, and that the fact that we have a foundation to stand on even as a culture and a society, is because we had people who came before us and put all these things into place. And I'm not saying to disrespect that, but that's our secondary loyalty, you know? So if you're going to respect one sacrifice more than the other, then respect Jesus' sacrifice more. I think kind of the last point we'll touch on is this idea of even having a right to your emotions in American culture. Have we talked about having rights in general and that being an American principle?
Nope.
Yeah, so our entire country is founded on the fact that we have rights, but that's not what Jesus says. Like, when we talk about having rights, we base it on things like in the Old Testament, he says not to steal. That's one of the 10 Commandments. And you can't steal unless there is ownership. But again, we're not basing things off of the law. We're basing things off of intimacy and Jesus. And stealing is selfish and not God's will. And we do steward things, but that doesn't mean that they belong to us. And it's the same kind of idea with rights, except that even if we did have them, Jesus says to lay them all down. And he's like, your life is not yours. You were bought at a price. Honor God with your body. That's Paul.
Yep.
And he tells us to stay in whatever position we find ourselves in specific reference to slaves. I'm not saying slavery is a good thing, but I'm saying
Jesus is on a whole other way.
the right to freedom isn't even like taken into account with Jesus, because he doesn't even care what position we're in physically if our heart is in the wrong position. Like, what matters to him is the freedom of our spirit and our soul and our heart, which will totally, like, it doesn't even matter what position you find yourself in physically.
Precisely. Like, it literally does not matter what your outward condition is. You could be free inside and in bondage and actual chains on the outside, or vice versa. Like, it doesn't matter.
Slavery was terrible, and the things done in slavery were terrible. The way the slaves were treated were terrible. Here in America, I'm assuming everywhere else, but I only really understand the history of American slavery.
Yeah.
And there's all this Black Lives Matter stuff going on, and there's a lot of hurt revolving around that. And I'm not by any means justifying what was done or just the horrendous evil that was involved.
Yeah, Jesus is not okay with these things.
Yeah, Jesus is not okay with these things. But I am saying that you do not have a right to yourself any more than a car has a right to itself, or, you know, it's like, we would like to think that, and no one else definitely has a right to us. Like, no other man has a right to me, but we do not have rights to ourselves. God has the rights to us. So before or after we give our lives to him, though?
I mean, that's kind of ever.
Yeah.
Like, you can pretend that you have a right to yourself.
Yeah, that's
and
kind of our
operate.
issue. It's kind of our sin.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
basically,
it basically comes back to that.
our whole sin and, like, fallen nature is even pretending that we have rights to ourselves, and we have rights to our own opinions, and we have rights to our own comfort. We have no rights. Jesus says, I've called you friends, and I no longer call you servants, but friends. So we have the best master that ever existed. And he's, like, actually our friend. Like, I've been friends with my boss before. That was really cool. But it's so much better than even that. It's like Jesus has all the rights to us, but he still operates with us in relationship, even within that. So it's like we give all of our rights to Jesus, and then we are not forced to adhere to any restriction that he puts on our rights, but we are asked to out of relationship. So the choice to give up our rights is ours, even though they don't belong to us. The choice to then walk in relationship with those rights is still ours, even though they belong to us, or they belong to him. But the rights themselves are not ours. They belong to God.
Yeah, America, in the Declaration of Independence says that, like, basically we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Jesus says, and I think it's funny to me, each one of these things seems to answer in order of the other one. But Jesus says, like, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Like, that is not life, liberty,
Die
and the
to
pursuit
yourself.
of happiness. Yeah, like, die to yourself.
Take up your servanthood
Yeah.
and follow me no matter whether it makes you happy or not in the moment.
Yeah. So,
But, I mean, that's so much better in the end than doing things ourselves and finding our own way. But it goes against this American ideal we have, which I think is why Jesus is so watered down, because it's like, oh, he asks us to do these things that aren't right based on what we've been taught about what we should expect as humans. So we'll just kind of write those off and pay attention to the verses that we like, you know?
Yep.
So
yeah, and it's kind of crazy,
that's a big
like,
one.
to the point of, like, I've even heard Christians who, like, say in defense of having guns, that being one of the big constitutional rights, that they would defend that to the death. Like, if the government came, like, they would be up in arms and, like, but, like, what part of Jesus is okay with that? Like, where?
The part that was spit in his face and smacked and mocked, or
The part where he rebuked Peter for defending him, the one person that had the only right to be defended?
oh yeah, that part.
Yeah. Like, it just baffles my mind. And so I think we really need to separate from the culture. It's so empowering the kingdom of darkness and taking power from what could be the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Like, it's crippling us
Yeah.
to try and hold on to these things.
I just want to say the Constitution is not the Bible.
Yeah.
Neither is the Declaration of Independence. None of those things. They're very important to the to the structure of our society and our government,
Yep.
and the way that our country functions, and like everything that makes America America. They're super important to that,
Yeah.
but they do not have any relevance to our spiritual life whatsoever. And if they do, then we need to do a serious heart check and be like, is what I see as good and me in alignment with what Jesus says is good and what is me, you know?
It's like, what part of all of that is you turning your other cheek? And you, like, this is what Jesus says. Like, you have to reconcile this. You can't just, like, skim over and be like, well, I don't know, it's probably fine. Like,
yeah.
this is the creator of the universe saying things. We should probably pay
Yeah.
attention.
Like, it's okay to not be sure, but just take your time to actually think about these things.
And actually go ask him. Like, we're
Jesus
not even saying,
doesn't
like,
just say things for the sake of saying things, and like,
and we're not saying, like, just take your initial interpretation of something and run with it. Because, like, the Pharisees read the Bible, and Jesus is like, you read the scriptures because you think and then you have salvation. But in reality, you don't know that they point to me. Like, they point to actual relationships. So we don't want you to make a system out of that either. We just want you to, like, go before Jesus with your hands open, whatever the heck the issue might be, and be like, Lord, what do you think of this? I'm willing for you to take this. You can give it back if you want. You can keep it, whatever. Like, it's yours. I'm surrendering. Like, that's the whole idea. And it goes further than, like, even these, like, general American rights. It's like, within that, we think we have a right to our appearance, our resources, you know, all these different things.
the
our
things that
jobs,
we do, like
Yeah.
hobbies
and stuff. Yeah, like,
I mean, that all kind of comes with freedom and pursuit of happiness and stuff, but
yeah.
just because we can doesn't mean that we should.
But in reality, most of us are in bondage to these things.
Yeah.
Like, you have a right to go dress up and put a bunch of makeup on, but are you actually in bondage to that? Are you actually covering up
Can
your
you leave the
insecurity?
house without feeling insecure?
Yeah. Or, like, for dudes, like, are you buff and jacked because, you're in bondage to what your friends think, and you want people to look at you. And like some of the most insecure people I've met have been like shredded, and it's the weirdest thing in my mind.
Yeah.
But like Jesus is just like, you don't have a right to yourself. And that's not in like this crazy judgment hard sort of way. It's like he so wants to be involved.
Yeah.
Like he's a good father that he's like, hey, I want to help you pick out your wardrobe. Like, hey, are you like if you pick that thing out, are you trying to appeal to this person, or do you care about what I think? Like it all comes from this loving place of him wanting to be involved, not like God standing back and being like, you're bad, you can't do anything right, you need to give it all up. Like he's like, no, I have better for you.
Yeah.
Like my dreams are so much better for you, for your life. So stop trying to do it yourself.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about this in relation to like sayings. I thought about this. I thought this same thing about sayings before in the past, but I'm like, I'm sure that these sayings like so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. I'm sure that sayings like that had some kind of useful purpose at some point. And like if you understand what the person who originally said that meant, maybe they really loved Jesus, and like there was a specific audience to which that like was helpful. But you can also take that to mean if I spend too much time with God, then I just won't be any good here on earth, so I shouldn't spend too much time with God, which is wrong. So depending on which perspective you look at it from, you could think it's a good thing or you could think it's a bad thing. And I think that's kind of at play in a lot of these scenarios. Like if you're listening right now and you're like, well, but this and like the Constitution's, like you can take up arms if you want to. We're taking that chance. But our point here is not simply to say that these things are wrong, all of them, and you're terrible and blah, blah, blah. Like our heart behind even pointing these things out is that you would think about what you actually believe. And if you actually desire to get closer to Jesus, to think about the ways that your preconceived notions and kind of the things you take for granted are keeping you from growing in intimacy with Jesus, because you see the Bible in conflict with this culture that you don't even recognize that you have. So people will be angry, probably, because people are always angry. But if you're listening and this has had any kind of impact on you, then this was for you. And
Yeah.
we're taking the chance of getting backlash because we care and because we want you to find freedom and all the fullness that God has for you. And you can't do that if you don't even know what you're in bondage to. So we hope that this benefits you and that you don't hate us and that you feel loved and appreciated in all of this, and that there's no fingers being pointed whatsoever at any person.
Yeah, and feel free to just respond to
Yeah,
things.
for sure.
Feel free to message us or whatever. You can email us at podcast@ywamnashville.org and give us some feedback if you so desire. But we just encourage you, before you even do that, whether it's good feedback or bad feedback, just go be with the Lord.
Yeah.
And be like, Lord, they're saying these things. Maybe it frustrates me,
That's good.
but like, what do you think about this, Lord? Like, Lord, do I have a right to own guns and fight off the government if they try to take them? Or do I, I don't know, whatever it could be.
That's so good.
Any of the things we talked about, that's just the one that popped in my brain. But, so just be with the Lord.
Yeah. And I will say I have a much gentler tone in actual conversation than I do in a podcast with Michael, who happens to agree with me in most of these things.
Hi,
So
there it is.
we respect your feedback, and we hope to hear from you. Nobody's actually responded other than in person so far, like our friends who live here with us. But it would be awesome if you did, if you're listening. So, yeah, look forward to it. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions that you'd like cleared up, or if you straight up disagree, you can still send us an email. But like Michael said, talk to the Lord first. And yeah.
Yep.
That wraps it up, I think.
Yep.
I don't really think we have a ton of time for a fun question.
Yeah, probably not this round. But tune in next week for fun question time.
We could do what's your favorite?
What's your favorite kind of donut, Cody?
That's what I was literally gonna say. It's like we're right there, you and me. Oh man, it's hard to say, but I had this like chocolate cream filled Krispy Kreme donut one time. It was like dark chocolate or something. It wasn't just your normal chocolate. Anyways, I still think about that one to this day.
Man,
there's been lots of good ones that have come and gone, but that was delicious.
I think for me, my donut loving is generally on about the same level between all of them. I actually am not very picky as far as donuts.
No, I'm just kidding.
Though cake donuts aren't my fave. If you handed me one, I'd be excited about it. But I would take yeast donuts any day. But my favorite type of donut, I like to get the most donut I can get. And so they have like Long Johns, but they you sometimes fill them with something, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can get way more donut. Like, why would you not pick that? Even if it's raspberry filled or, I don't know, like things sometimes people don't like as much as like custard filled or something. But I'm like, but it's more donut.
I know.
Like, who cares
as
what
it's
filled with?
As a kid, our grandpa would take us out to donuts like every weekend that we spent the night at their house.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, you can pick out any donut. And I'd be like, oh, man. And there was always that big old cinnamon roll covered in caramel icing. And I'm like, how can I pass that up? It's freaking ginormous.
Yeah.
So I get that like almost every time just because of the sheer size.
Yeah.
So.
Even if it's not quite your favorite, though, which is funny.
Yeah, I know. I was like, a lot of these are probably tastier, but sheer quantity, though,
More, well, it's not bang for your buck, but,
I was going to say, if you say Walmart yeast donuts are your favorite, American culture dictates that I disown you. So it's going to.
Actually, there's an Amish bakery here by us. If you ever come to the base. Schley balls.
Yeah, those are
it's actually Schlabachs.
Schlabachs? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's just what I've always heard it called, so I wouldn't know any better.
I think it's just because I heard somebody else say it that way, and I just didn't know better.
Man. Speaking of preconceived notions,
yeah.
Did you guys know that red, yellow, and blue aren't actually the primary colors?
Man.
It's been freaking blowing my mind. You probably already knew this because there's lots of, like, artists and science teachers and stuff out there who already understood this, but the 4 primary colors for light are red, green, and blue. And then the 4 primary colors. Cody failed his math test for the day. Oh man, that's embarrassing. And the 3 primary colors for pigment are actually magenta, cayenne, as Michael called it, and yellow.
Cayenne pepper.
And yellow. And like the reason that they're different is like it's really crazy, but if you mix 2 of the primary colors of light, it makes one of the primary colors of pigment. And if you mix 2 of the primary colors of pigment, it makes one of the primary colors of light. It's super crazy.
It's nuts. It'll blow your mind.
It's because pigments are taking away light, so they're like the opposite. They're like negative light. And then light is adding light, so it's like positive light. I don't know. Look it up. It'll blow your mind.
The takeaway is they lied to you in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So.
Kindergarten teachers are liars. Not really. We looked it up. It's a lot more complicated than that, but
yeah,
it was crazy. And we were just watching videos of people mixing magenta and cyan to make
which
blue.
is like a lighter blue, and it would turn into like
it turns into straight up blue,
dark blue.
You're like, how does purple and light blue make blue, like normal blue?
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense.
It's the weirdest thing.
Or you mix magenta and yellow.
You get green.
No. I'm thinking of red. Isn't it yellow? You mix magenta and yellow, and you get
red.
I
think you get red. Yeah.
Like what? Red is a primary color. How do you mix 2 other colors?
When was the last time you looked at red and you were like, "That's a very yellowy magenta kind of color"?
Yeah. Just no. It's crazy.
Anyways, there's your random
blow your mind for the day.
Mind blown. If this episode wasn't enough, there it is.
Yeah.
It just happened.
If we didn't already destroy your world enough.
We just had to be sure.
All right.
Oh, man.
We love you guys. Thanks for listening. It's been great. Hopefully we'll have an actual guest in for the next episode. That's
Yeah.
always fun. And yeah.
Yep.
Any closing remarks, Michael?
Jesus is the answer. Go be with him.
I have one. Sometimes when you are a man, you wear stretchy pants in your room just for fun.
It's for fun. Oh, man.
Nacho!
There it is. Peace and love.
Bye. Felicia.